We are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Under the Iceberg, episode 2.
Oh, there you are. All right.
It's quite the 90s dance mix you got
I
going
know.
on there.
I'm nodding my head.
Yeah, it's like...
You've done a good job of referencing like a number of other songs.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dean Floyd. With me is James S. Aaron.
Hello.
And today we are interviewing Rick Partlow.
Hello.
Hello, Rick. Rick is a man who needs no introduction, but I will say that I heard it's been said of Rick that Rick Partlow doesn't breathe. He just holds air hostage.
Oh, jeez.
Rick Partlow never retreats. He just attacks in the opposite direction. And Rick Partlow doesn't even shower. He only takes blood baths.
Oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Rick Partlow. Well, Rick, it is an honor to have you on the show and to tackle this second episode. I wanted to share, let's see here, this. This is the cheesy inspiration for the show. My wife bought me this poster. And if this was like a tier of like steps, I'm definitely on step 2, which is failure. So
it's the hardest acronym to say in the world.
Yeah.
You're failing upwards, so you're good.
So for those that are not benefiting from the video feed, it's a poster of success, and it's an iceberg, and success is what you can see at the top of the above the surface of the water, and then underneath is hard work, persistence, late nights, rejection, sacrifice, discipline, criticism, doubts, failure, risks. And actually, all of this reminds me of the first time I met you, Rick, which was at the first 20 Books Vegas event. And somebody who I won't name foolishly asked me to come up and speak briefly on stage. Me, who had just published, not my first novel, but my first novella. And so I got up there and thought like, oh, well, I'll just like fake it till I make it, right? So I got up there and I said a few words and some people clapped. And then afterwards, you and some other gentlemen approached me and met me. But here we are 4 or 5 years later, whatever the math is. And nobody knows who I am, but they all know who you are. So the point of that little story was that, you can get up there and fake it till you make it. Or you can put in the hard work behind the scenes. And I think nobody exemplifies you more than that. Nobody exemplifies that more than you. So, it's obvious that you put in a lot of work to get where you are today, and we want to dig into that.
Yeah. So Rick, you're on. Are we book 9 of Drop Trooper now, or we're moving into?
I finished. Book 9 just got published recently.
Right. So
next one will be 10.
10 books coming in Drop Trooper. How many books in Duty Honor Planet?
Just 3.
Just 3.
When I started out, I was very much in the trad pub mindset of let's do trilogies.
Mm-hmm. But I guess where I was going is I'm trying to. That's one of the things. Like, you have put in the work. I think you mentioned recently that you finished or are about to finish your 50th novel. And
actually, I just finished the 51st.
50. See, it changed. We got to like set a time and date on when these milestones are passed. But if there's anybody I know who has put in the work and only recently, started doing this full time, like had been working, another career the whole time, it's you. And so I think that's something that would definitely be great to hear about. But how many series in total? Do you have that one off the top of your head, or is that going to stump you for a second?
I think it's a dozen.
A dozen.
I counted the other day, and I think it was a dozen.
Yeah.
But it might be 13. I can't remember.
I guess the only thing similar, they are all in science fiction and mostly military
science fiction or
right?
Space opera.
Yeah.
That area.
I love
usually a mix of
lost
both.
Track.
Well, I could name each of them, but it's just counting them all as I do it.
Yeah.
Well, and you get focused on what you're working on currently, and everything else is like, oh yeah, I wrote that. I kind of forgot about that. But,
so Rick,
can you?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Since 2017, I have written I think 8 novels, maybe, and a few short stories. So just to put it in perspective for people, how many do you think you've written since we met, since 2017?
Since 2017, at the end of 2017, I had written, let's see, 6, 7. I had written, I think, 11, so 40.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Stop the show there.
So, well, what is that?
Go ahead.
We can start with Dean. I don't want to get off track on the questions, but I think that might be a good place to start. Is what do you think you were doing prior to that, and then what shifted at that point that kind of put things in high gear for you?
Well, not to be crass about it, but I made a bunch of money in 2017, and before that, I hadn't had like the incentive. I mean, I was working steadily, writing a book every few months, but then something made a lot of money, and I'm like, I should do more of this. I mean, because I at the time, up till the end of 2016, I had the idea that, I mean, at one point I thought I could be a full-time author back in the trad publishing days, but I hadn't done that. So when I began self-publishing on Amazon in 2011, I made a few $1,000s a year, not a whole lot. Um, but in 2016, I did something right somehow, and I made a whole bunch of money from that. And I'm like, well, this means that I could do this full time and make, support the family through this. And so I just started working on it harder.
When you say working on it harder, what do you mean by that exactly?
Up until that point, I had been writing, I don't want to say as a hobby, but I had been writing as something. I did it because it was something I just loved to do. So when I did it, it felt like I was not working. Like with my photography, when I do photography, it's to relax. It's to do something I love to do. And if I do it too much or too often, I feel a little bit guilty that I've, spent all that time. And it was the same way with writing. I wrote, but I had family, I had other responsibilities. So when I did it, I felt kind of like it was having fun. I wasn't working. I wasn't doing something productive. But once I realized
you were teaching part of that, right? So it was definitely an escape from teaching.
Yeah. So once I realized that this could be a career, it could be something that really made money, then I had to get disciplined and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write this many words a day. I'm going to finish these books. I'm going to market them. I had to look at it like a business. I mean, even though I still love writing, I still enjoy it. I had to say, this is a set time that I'm going to start doing it. And this is what I have to get done. So I got serious about, not the craft, but the discipline part of it, the actual getting the words down.
Mm-hmm.
Before you hit it big, Rick, as it were, what was there any difference in the craft, or had just the stars aligned at that point?
I don't know that there was any difference in the craft. Once I started making more money, I started plotting. I had never outlined before, but I wanted to write more books, and that seemed to be the best way to do it faster, because I had been very much a pantser, discovery writer, writing out of the dark. However, Dean Wesley Swiftnick, it sounds like it's something holy, but it was just because that's how I enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun, but it's still fun. It's still fun when I'm plotting the book and I come to these epiphanies that I used to get while I was staring at the screen. I just do it, over the space of a couple of weeks instead of a year. I get the outline done in a couple of weeks, and then I know what's going to happen. But no, craft wise, no, I don't think there was really any change that made it happen.
So it wasn't quality. It was just your output increased exponentially.
Yes. I think maybe it was that I hit a tipping point as far as the number of books I had out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had written one a year, so I had 3 books in one series and 3 books in another. And then I wrote a prequel to the second series. And once the prequel was there and the other 3 books were already there, people just really took to that and started reading it.
So it's important to have a backlog of books that people
Yes.
could read in sequential order, not just
Mhm.
random standalones.
Right, exactly. I mean, in my genre, I don't know about
Mhm.
everybody's genre, like thrillers or mysteries, but in military science fiction and space opera, I would say definitely.
But it feels like you have gotten or learned lessons around, okay, if this series isn't doing what I want it to, time to transition to something different and something new. Is that something you've been able to do in your planning, or you've learned about that over time? Or did you make was that a place where you learned a hard lesson and have gotten better at it over time?
I did learn a hard lesson that now I feel kind of bad calling this a failure because it did okay, but it didn't do anywhere near what the rest of the things I'd done. I had this idea that because I told you I had the trad pub mindset. All right, trilogy. So I said I'm going to write a long series, and it's going to be space opera. It's going to be this quirky Firefly like crew. It'll have a potential to go on for a long time. And I wrote 4 books in it, and it did really lukewarm. And people didn't really like the characters as much. And so at around the beginning of the 4th book, I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't going to work. I finished the 4th book, and I'm like, yeah, this is closed. And then I wrote another series, a trilogy again, where I took all the characters from my other books and put them together, thinking that I could get some use out of the characters from the series by putting them with the ones that have been more popular. And that worked even worse. And I'm like, yeah, I need to rethink things. And I kind of started fresh and didn't come back to that universe for a while. Although when I did, it was with Drop Trooper, which is one of my more successful ones. So
Interesting. Rick, I'm interested. I kind of know your daily output, like your average word count per day now, but well, if you could share that with people, like what's your goal, and then what was it back then before? Has it changed at all? And like, what were you able to write per day when you first started writing?
when I first started writing, I feel like if I wrote anything per day, I mean, it was a it was more of a thing where I would sit down and stare at the screen, or maybe I'd go back and reread the whole book up to that point, and then I would write, a few hundred words, and I'd feel really accomplished. I'd edit some stuff in the. I'd do that. Is that called the onion method? I forget. But it's where you go back to the beginning and you start editing, and then you get to the end and you're on a roll. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so a few hundred words a day, if I was lucky. It took somewhere between a year to 14 months to finish a book, although they were longer books back then.
Like
My
how long?
first three, my first 3 books. The second one was 190,000 words.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
wow.
Third one was 180,000 words. This is military science fiction, so it's a long book.
Yeah.
Like epic fantasy.
Yeah.
And
So
you were sporadic about it. You were just kind of like whenever the muse hit you, as it were.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And eventually, in 2017, when I started writing the Recon series, actually, I set a goal of 2,000 words a day. And I kept that up as long as I was writing one thing at a time, 2,000 words a day. And then at a certain point in, I want to say 2019, I started writing like 2 things at a time. And it was 4,000 words a day. And then for about a 2-year period, it was close to 5,000 words a day. And I would write 3 different books. I was writing 2,000 each in a couple of different books and 1,000 in a third. But I could not keep that up. I kept that up for most of 2019 and 2020. And when at the end of 2020, I wrote a dozen books.
Wow.
And And I said, and I wrote 1,000,000 words, and I'm like, this is great. I can't do this every year. It's just too much. So I cut back to now the most I'll do is 4,000 words a day, 2 different things at once, 2,000 like in the early part of the day, and then 2,000 later on.
And are they unrelated projects? Like
Yeah,
totally
unrelated.
different? Yeah.
I know some people can do this. I don't know how they do it. I could not write like books 2 and 3 of a series at the same time because I have a pretty detailed outline, but things can change. You know, if I'm going along and something feels like I should do this right now, I'll still do it, which could change everything in book 3. So I couldn't do that.
Has that been a lesson you've learned about plotting, is to, give yourself the space to make shifts like that if it makes sense for the character? Or, have you always...
I started out, pantsing, discovery writing. So I've always preferred that. And I still have more fun pantsing than I ever did plotting, because it's kind of like watching a movie or watching somebody else write a book, because you're just thinking about things. Oh, yeah, this makes sense. But so I've always had a tendency to do that, and even with outlining, it happens more in books where I've deep into a series and I know the characters. So something happens and I'm like, yeah, that's not what should happen. I should do this, and then it'll change.
We got a comment here from
We have
James.
lots of comments. Yeah.
James says, yeah, I discovered the mixing of 2 things to try and get the best of results of both. But for him, it tends to end up with people responding to the worst parts of both.
Is he talking about like when I put the characters together?
Yeah.
It was a bad idea. I mean, it was a bad idea financially. I still think that those books are some of the best I've written. I mean, the emotional beats, the name of the trilogy is called War, and it takes place in the same universe as Glory Boy and Birthright and Drop Trooper and all that, and it is apocalyptic in every sense of the word. Like the whole civilization comes down basically, and millions, if not billions, of people die, and everything is totally changed by the end, and the characters have to go through all this. And I thought, it was the few people who have read it really liked it, but it's just, people didn't get interested in it. So what can you do?
Move on to something else.
Well, I guess, exactly.
Speaking of that, and I guess this is kind of going back to the very beginning, but are you, you have this ability to shift between ideas or learn and adjust from ideas. How many, are you sitting on a bunch of unfinished trunk novels or ideas that you've tried and, didn't move forward with? Do you have any of those that are like favorites that you would like to, readdress at some point?
I looked it up when I saw the questions you're going to ask. I have, I believe, 9 portions of novels. And it used to be I had, like a couple dozen, but I've written all those after, when I got to the point where I didn't want to write in that universe anymore because people weren't buying it. I just broke out all these trunk novels and started finishing them. Wholesale Slaughter was a trunk novel. I had the first 30,000 words of that finished, and I just, I rewrote it a little bit, but.
So why do you think you didn't finish it in the first place? So it wasn't the idea.
Well, this takes a going back because as I said, I originally was trying to become a traditionally published writer, and I had that idea even when I was in the Army. And when I got out, I started graduate school, and then my wife and I were expecting, and we decided that she was making a lot more money than I was at the time, so I was going to stay home with the kid. And I'm like, well, since I'm staying home, I'm going to try to get traditionally published. I'm going to finish these novels. So I wrote 2 books and got an agent, which everybody told me was the hardest part. And she edited those things first. She put like 4 different editors on me, and for a period of over a year, just sliced them up, put them back together. and then tried to sell them for a couple more years and just couldn't do it. And at that point, I was really discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not have the incentive to hurry up and finish anything. And I definitely didn't have the incentive to write more books in those series, which I wish I'd done. But instead, I just came up with ideas, and the ideas were cool, and I liked writing the first part of them. But then I would just get to the mushy middle, and like, it's too hard now, and I would start on something else. So I have like 9 left that most of them will never get written because a lot of them are trends that were happening in the 90s that aren't really exciting anymore.
I think this one kind of ties into that because was just curious, like, what do you consider that? Obviously that was kind of the advice everybody got back then, was to go get an agent. Do you see that as a mistake now, or as a learning experience? Or,
well, at the time, this was 1996. It's not like I had any other choice. There was no independent publishing then.
Yeah. And Hawk was still alive, so I
didn't really do anything with them. I let some friends of mine read them, and one of them, around 2010, started telling me about KDP, about independent publishing. And at the time, to me, self-publishing meant vanity publishing. People with boxes of books in their garage that they never sell. And they pay thousands of dollars to look like idiots. So I didn't want to do that. But then about 2011, he started showing me these articles about people who made hundreds of thousands of dollars self-publishing their books. So I'm like, I might as well do it. So I took the 2 books that I had with the agent, which were Duty, Honor, Planet, and Birthright, the first 2 I ever finished. Not ever finished, but the first 2 that were publication ready. And I slapped these homemade covers on them that I got the images like off publicly available images on the internet. They weren't even book shaped; they were square. And I put these
remember that.
cheesy lettering on them with Photoshop, and they weren't properly formatted. They were edited because they'd been edited, and they still had mistakes even then. After 4 editors each, and all that, they still have mistakes. So I put them up for 99 cents each, and I would have put them free if they'd let me, but they wouldn't. 99 cents was the cheapest you could put them there. I just basically did it so people could see them and I could tell whether or not, they were any good. And I sold between the 2 of them 30,000 copies in like 4 or 5 months, which was great. But I didn't have anything to follow up with because I hadn't been writing. And by the time I said I should write a sequel to one of these, well, it took me a year. And by then, most of those people had gone their separate ways. And so I had a bunch of momentum and I wasted that. Like I said, it took me until 2016, like 5 years, the end of 2016, to build back up to having, a backlist and people who were interested in reading my stuff, and not just, whatever's cheap. So that's how I wound up in KDP.
Nice. It feels like that momentum piece is something that is hard, especially when you're beginning. It's hard to conceptualize that. It's like anything. You got to give. If you're selling somebody Coke, you want them to continue to be able to buy more Coke, right? And so with books, it's kind of the same thing, and that's hard to.
That's the one thing that if I could go back and give myself advice, it would be, and there's no way I could have known this, and it probably wouldn't have been as good at the time, but I would have written sequels to those books while I had those years in between. And then when I decided to publish, I would have had, here's the first 3 books in this series and released them a few weeks apart. Then this other series, released them a few weeks apart, and, probably would have made tens of thousands of dollars more. And, but it didn't happen that way, and things have gone fine. It just took a little while longer.
Patricia asks, what drew you into mill sci-fi as opposed to, like, earlier you were talking about writing space opera?
Well, one of the first books I wrote for publication was Mill Sci-Fi, and it's hard to remember. I remember coming up with the plot for it in my military history class in ROTC, and I guess the fact that people liked it and I liked writing it just made me want to write more in that. I mean, I still wrote space opera because the first two books I wrote, one was Mill Sci-Fi and the other was space opera. So I really wrote, a mix of both for several years until I hit, the ones that people really wanted to read, which turned out to be Mill Sci-Fi, which is why I write more of that.
Nice, thank you. So in your I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. What failures do you think, or maybe setbacks, did you have when you were trying to get in? Treat this as treat this as an author business.
Well, I think there's two major I don't know if I had major setbacks, but there were setbacks I had right about 2017, 2018. The first was trying to market and not knowing how, and I wasted several $100s on ads that really didn't do anything. And at one point in 2019, I gave up on trying to do my own ads, and I was about to give up on writing professionally, not for fun, but I just couldn't figure out marketing. So that was one of them, and the other was we already talked about, was that series that didn't do that well. I should have kept going on the successful series that had made me money and people liked, and not tried to give them new characters that they wound up not liking.
Well, and you've kind of spoken to that, like you wrote 4 books in one series and kind of ran out of steam with the characters. Like Drop Trooper, that hasn't happened, thankfully, knock on wood. But was there a shift in your thinking about in developing those characters, or is it something you learned from that process, or maybe previous series that you did differently with these new series to help give them more wings, to continue on with the story?
This is going to sound a little bit cynical, maybe, or crass or commercial, but in that series that people didn't like, I tried to make the characters more human and have more weaknesses, and people don't like that. They did not like it. They did, and in their space opera or military science fiction, they don't want people who have made bad decisions and treated other people badly and had to learn from that. They want people who they're rogues and outlaws, maybe, but that's because they did something so cool that it was illegal. They don't want people who made mistakes and had to learn from them. That's like I said, that sounds cynical, but this isn't literary fiction I'm writing. So I got to give the people what they want to read, and what they want to read is, I don't want to say superheroes, but action heroes. Yeah, larger than life action heroes, and if you want to make them flawed or have weaknesses, it had better be a weakness that is like a kick-ass weakness. As weird as that sounds, but the weakness they want is somebody who's like tormented by the war, so they're they may have an extra drink at night or maybe have a nightmare. They don't want somebody who has one bad relationship after another because they have PTSD.
I don't want to read about my life, man.
Yeah. So
kind of external, drama or conflict as opposed to internal.
Right. And yes, exactly.
It's easier to come up with stories around that then, because you're not kind of solving their internal problems. So you're just coming up with new.
It's not, because I have a perverse need to actually make these characters realistic and human. So it's really difficult to get somebody who seems that everybody is going to like and still look up to, and yet has real weaknesses, that real people would have. So it's not easy.
What practical tips do you have for like balancing that tightrope walk?
I think people will forgive everything about a character except being a whiner.
Hmm.
The thing I get complaints about, well, even with characters who are side characters who are supposed to be whiners and annoying because that's their function in the story, people don't want to read about them. They don't like annoying characters. The latest series, Sun Killer, there is a character who's like a graduate student whose total function in the plot was to be somebody who's totally out of their depth and doesn't know what they're doing and is thrust into this dangerous situation and has to be taught how to handle themselves and grow. People hated him from the beginning. They're like, they're too annoying. They're too whiny. Well, yeah, I mean, it took some guy who lives in Berkeley, California, and put him on an alien planet with people shooting at him. Yeah, he's going to be whiny, but you got to do something to keep them from being whiny. I mean, like they got to have an unrealistically stoic attitude about things. So they don't like the readers in general do not like whiny characters, even if they're supposed to be whiny.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I learned that too. That is it's weird because it feels like you're writing somebody that readers can relate to, but most people just are like, I don't want to, this is too close to home.
I think readers want an idealized version of themselves.
Yeah, Kit in the comments notes they want aspirational characters, heroes, role models. That's why taking Superman Dark is a mistake and not as fun for folks. Like I think people want conflict. They want to see a character do something. They just don't want to be tied up in all the internal drama because they've got enough of that. That's not why I'm reading.
They don't mind internal drama as long as it's kind of heroic internal drama.
Serves a purpose.
Like should I save the people I love or should I save the universe? That kind of thing.
Yeah, the stakes they're not whining about their circumstances. They're concerned about these huge conflicts. That makes sense.
So I noticed you're wearing an Athon Books t-shirt, which is some great marketing. But we did want to ask, I don't know what we should go to first. Probably maybe since you tried marketing. I know. So when did you move to Athon? Was that 2019 or 2020?
It was 2019. It was Wholesale Slaughter was the first series I did with them. And I wear this shirt. I mean, I didn't even think about it. I wear it all the time because it's the most comfortable shirt I have, which was a great improvement by them. The first one I bought from them sucked, but this one is just incredible material. It's very comfortable.
Good job. Well, what can you talk about that decision? Because it sounds like you tried, you put a lot of work into those books. It's apparent to me that you've put a lot of thought into what makes a book successful or not successful with readers, but you still did make the decision to move with a publisher and have, continued with some other publishers with, later series. Can you talk about that decision and what you learned, or maybe if you thought there were some part of that learning process?
Well, as I was saying, in late 2018, I had a couple of different failures, and my income was going down, and which wouldn't have been so bad, except I was working even harder. I was working like writing more words and putting out more books, and yet my income kept going down. And I was spending money on marketing, studying, listening to podcasts, reading blogs, trying to find out how to market. And nothing I did worked. So I was at the point where I was either going to find someone else to do my marketing for me, or I was going to stop writing so much. I mean, I was still going to write because I love writing, but I was going to write what I wanted to write, like that epic fantasy I've never wound up writing. I was going to write, a reasonable number of hours a week, concentrate on just, making money other ways. And on the advice of a friend, who was publishing a series with Athon, John Ross. I talked to them at 20 Books, and I said, I've got this. I had finished writing Wholesale Slaughter uh, for a NaNoWriMo, just for the heck of it, and I'd actually wound up writing into what became the second book. But I said, I've got this series. Are you guys interested in this? And they said, sure. So we signed a contract, and I got a nice advance from Audible for 6 books, which was 3 more than I intended to write in the series. And I wrote it with them, and it did really well. I mean, it wasn't like a huge takeoff like Drop Trooper, but it was better than anything else I'd been putting out. And they seemed to really know what they were doing when it came to marketing. So when they asked me to write more military science fiction for them, I did. And then that series turned out to be Drop Trooper. And I've done Holy War with them now, which has been really successful. And I also signed over the rights to a couple of my older backlist series, and they've done those and made audiobooks out of them. And it was a match made in heaven as far as I was concerned, because, like I said, I didn't know marketing. I had looked into maybe hiring somebody to market for me, and I knew someone I trusted at that. But when it came down to it, between what they were charging me and what I was spending for ads, I was only going to just break even or make a tiny bit of money, and it just wasn't going to be worth it. So I came very close to just stepping back from the whole attempt to be a professional full-time writer.
Yeah, nothing is more frustrating than doing things with thoughtful, diligent intention and then seeing no fruition from that at all. And so it sounds like your lesson there for yourself was that you realized I just can't do this right now, and I need to hand this off to someone else. And I'm glad you did, because man, I really like Drop Trooper. So
Glad to hear
back
it.
in 2018, it seemed like that was the magic sauce. Like, that's what everybody was talking about. Like, just write more books. But it does sound like you have been intentional about, okay, you had Wholesale Slaughter, you were in a place where you could still have kind of a new thing to try with a new publisher, and then have still been somewhat flexible in your planning of series, so that when an opportunity arrives, because like Sun Killers with Variant, that you can potentially try something out with someone else. So as an author or with your business, you're not keeping kind of all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's nothing against Athon. I love Athon. They're great. They've done great work, and they do great marketing. And Steve and Red are awesome at their jobs. And it's not that I haven't done things with other people is like because I don't trust them. It's just that Athon puts out a certain number of my books a year, and that's about all they can put out of mine, because otherwise they'll be over marketing, they'll be oversaturating it. But I still want to have, I still want to have as many sources of income as I can. So if Variant or Pramantha Press, if they put out a series of mine, then and it can do well in between all the other releases from Athon, then that's money I can use. So I want to make sure
to be a contract with only one client, right? So
exactly, yeah.
And it does seem too like you pay a lot of attention to just publishing in general. Is that something that you have always been interested in, or did you learn early on, that was something you needed to pay attention to as you make your choices?
I didn't pay enough attention to it at first. It only when things started to fall apart did I take more interest in it. I mean, in 2017, when things were growing, I tried to learn marketing, but I didn't really pay attention to things like Athon or LMBPN or those places. I'm like, I want to do this myself. This is me. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to market my books myself. But I didn't really pay attention to the growth of the small publishers until Athon came along. And then, if I had to make a guess based on current trends, I would say small publishers are going to pretty much control the genre market in the near future.
I would
Not
agree.
literary fiction, but as far as, and maybe not even mainstream science fiction, but military science fiction, space opera, lit RPG, urban fantasy, all the romance, sci-fi romance, cozy mystery, all the things that the independents have been controlling for the last few years. Small publishers are moving into those markets and making, big advances.
It's all about the
Some,
niche.
that's right.
Well, it's also about the fact that a lot of writers, including me, are writers and we're not marketers and we don't know what we're doing when it comes to marketing and publishing. So there is a need for people who do, who who will treat us fairly. Which is, I mean, there've been a lot of small publishers, small presses that have been scam artists, and
Right.
they've stolen people's money, taken control of their IPs, and not given them anything. So having reputable small publishers like Athon and Variant, that's it's a big change for the market.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge positive. I only see it as a gain. Something you said I don't want to gloss over. You've mentioned a few times actually is that you had written some of these books and had them in your back catalog unpublished, but later you were able to bring those out and they were able to see the light of day, and you were able to sign those books with Audible, I think you said. So I just wanted to remind people out there that just because you've written something that people didn't respond to at first, if you're thinking of this like a business, each of those stories are assets that you control and that you can revitalize someday in the future, given that the craft and the story was good in the first place.
Sure. Well, they hadn't bombed or anything. They had done well, but they had reached the end of their. They had reached the end of what I could do with them, but not what someone like Athon could do with them. They were able to take them and give them marketing that I had not been able to.
Yeah, the discovery piece of it. It's
Yeah.
that's something that can really assist with, so that you can focus on what where your time is better spent, which is coming up with the stories and the characters.
Well,
One
that's
thing,
what I really feel like has helped me to hit my stride is being able to not think about that stuff,
yeah,
because I worried about that a lot back in 2017, 2018. I was thinking about marketing hours a day and not making any money out of it.
that's what I wanted to ask about. So you are very aware of where your books are doing, and that appears to kind of, based on experience, kind of drive some of your decisions. Now that you're not handling that publishing piece of it, what metrics are you looking at? Like just straight up sales, or other things you're looking at to gauge the response to the books?
Well, sales, of course, is huge, but you also have to understand that there's only so big of a market.
Hmm.
So if something sold great and now it's like kind of leveled out, well, that's fine. But it's because you hit that market and it's not going to be hit again with that same book. It's like I've seen a lot of books that get, for people who know what BookBub is, a BookBub feature deal. I've seen a lot of books get repeated over and over on BookBub, but I bought those years ago, and now every time I see them, I wonder, is anybody new getting these at this point? Because they've been having deals for 4 years. So you've got to understand that if something's not selling as much, it doesn't mean it was a failure. It just means you hit that market. So for me, what I want to look at when I have a series that is done well and been well reviewed is what's the best way to tap into that? Again, do you write more books in that series, or do you write a similar series? And for me, I think writing a similar series is better, because if you write more books in the same series, uh, your audience for each one is going to go down a little bit. And I mean, you may have to spend a lot of time and effort and money getting people back on the book one to to help those. But you write something new, people are always more apt to jump in on something in book one than they are when it's 9 books out in it. So I think looking at what made that series successful, was it the universe it was set in? Was it the premise? Was it the subgenre?
What things are you going to gauge to make that decision? Are you looking at reviews potentially? Are you getting feedback from fans? Where would you kind of dig out what was the most successful thing about that series?
Reviews were really important. I do get a lot more interaction with fans now than I used to. Although I wonder sometimes if it's not a false representation, because the fans that contact you, they're very into your work, but are they going to be a representative of what has attracted most people to it? So that's, I mean, because I know that there's some fans that are very into certain portions of, the books I've written, but I don't think that that's the main reason why other people like them. So I think the reviews are important. I think the similarity of what you've done to what other people have done that's been successful is something you can look at. Like, for instance, is this book close to what has made, Galaxy's Edge successful as a series, or what's made J.N. Chaney's like Renegade Star series successful? What is it about this book that's like the, and is that why it hit so big?
And you can probably see some of that in the also bots on Amazon, or where
exactly, yeah.
Where your readers
Although that's not as useful as it used to be.
Yeah,
because of all the sponsored ads in there.
That actually leads into another question I wanted to ask, which was, what failures have you made when it comes to your readers and your fans and your brand?
My brand, I think that a failure I made back around late 2017 is I didn't realize why people were attracted to my brand, why they were reading the books that they read. I had the idea that it was the universe it was set in and the settings, but I think it was the characters. So when I tried to write more books in that universe, it was a mistake. I should have gone with the characters instead. And I also should have, as things turned out, I probably should have stuck closer to military science fiction than space opera.
Mm-hmm.
I also just connecting with the fans. I didn't start a newsletter soon enough and didn't attempt to grow it. My newsletter still isn't. I mean, it's big for what I originally had, but it's not big compared to some people. It's like under 4,000 people. So, I started that late and did not put enough effort into growing that, and that would have been a good way to connect with the fans.
Do you handle that yourself, or do you outsource that?
No, I do it myself.
Uh-huh. Is that something you enjoy, or do you wish you would? Are you thinking about outsourcing it?
I don't know if I enjoy it. It takes a lot of effort and time, but I don't really feel like paying somebody else to do it.
Uh-huh.
So,
how do you use it right now? Is it just like there's a new book out, or
mostly? It's mostly I don't put out a newsletter unless I've got something new coming out. I do say some personal stuff. Nothing like, I don't do movie reviews like some people do. Or review other books. I just, I will tell people, there's going to be a break in my production schedule because I'm taking a break. I'm doing this. I told people when I moved out here to Wyoming, I showed them pictures of the new house, but mostly it's just, this is what I'm working on. This is what you can expect to come out. And here's some books from other people that are similar to mine.
I guess Kit asked, tied into the questions about work you've put into the world building and how much the fans responded to that. How much time do you spend researching history, tactics, thinking about future tech, things of that nature?
I have an advantage there that when I was younger, I spent lots and lots of time uh, making future histories and future technologies and putting all that together. So I have like thousands and thousands and thousands of words worth of possible, like different future histories and possible technology and civilization, all that on my hard drive that I wrote when I was in my late teens, early 20s that I can just draw on. And um, when I do something new, like a new universe that I hadn't imagined before, then I can still use the research I did on all that and just kind of reshape it into something different. But I know that a lot of people spend a lot of time on world building, but for me, it's mostly just picking and choosing bits out of stuff I've already done.
So definitely starting with the characters and kind of going from there. But you've also found the characters are what people respond to the most.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that's one of the. I mean, not to cast aspersions on any other writers, and I would mention anybody by name, but I think that's one of the problems with a lot of modern military science fiction is they forget about the characters, and they think about the tropes and the action and the fights and all those are great, but none of those mean anything unless you care about the characters who are in them, and a lot of them just don't spend enough time on the characters.
Rick, who's an author that you would like to collaborate with?
Oh, there's a lot
Dead
of
or
them.
alive?
Dead or alive?
Yeah.
I know you got to give us the live one because we got to put you on the spot with it.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me. Sorry. Um, there's a lot of authors I respect, but it would probably be a nightmare to collaborate with, like John Ringo. He's a great author, but I've heard the way he writes, I don't know if I could ever collaborate with him because he like goes into his basement and writes for a month, comes out with a book, and then doesn't write again for 2 years. I think Larry Correia would be fun to collaborate with.
Heck yeah.
David Weber, he's a really nice guy. I got to meet him at 20 Books, and he seems like he would be great to collaborate with. If I collaborate with a dead author, I'll be doing most of the work. See, I don't know about ones that are not alive anymore because I don't know how they would. I guess Jerry Pournelle. I mean, a lot of people collaborated with him and seemed to have a good time doing it, and I really like his work. So that would probably be a good combination. He's good. He was always good with the world building and the technical details and the technology. And Larry Niven provided the characters, and the heart. So I could do the Larry Niven part for him if he was still alive.
Well, that kind of touches on something I did want to ask about. Was it feels like you are enjoy and are pretty good at the networking, just making friends piece of it, and that's been a real asset when it comes to kind of gaining information about the market or just knowing folks that are out there pushing things out. What are there any mistakes that you made earlier in that, or things you wish you'd done differently? And would you recommend that someone, like, if you've got, is it important to spend time getting to know other people that are in the field?
I think it's very important, and the mistake I probably made early on was not trying to do that until later. I mean, because I didn't really, like I said, until 2016, I didn't really think of it as I didn't think of myself as a professional author. I thought of myself as somebody who was, having fun writing books. I put them on Amazon and, a few hundred people read them, and then I'll write another one because it's fun. And there was a whole period in there between 2011 and 2016 where a lot of relationships were forming of the base, the people who started out, in the indie publishing industry, where I could have, built relationships with those people, and I didn't because I didn't think of myself, as a professional. and they were, and I, like, well, I read their blog, but I'm not going to contact them. It wasn't until about 2017, 20 books, that I started trying to network with anybody, which seems like a long time ago now, but I could have had better advice, because I think I spent a lot of the first 5.5 years of my independent publishing career uh, not treating it like a career. And if somebody given me better advice early on, I probably would have, you know, done things differently.
Rick, we are about 5 minutes out, and there's a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you. You touched on this briefly earlier, but tell us about a time when you quit writing like completely, or when you almost quit, and why was that?
Well, when I did not get traditionally published and me and my agent parted ways, I didn't finish a book for let's see, 15 years. So I wrote some. I had, like I said, like a lot of 20,000 word chunks of novels, but I pretty much stopped trying to finish anything. I didn't finish even a short story at that time. So yeah, I gave up because to me, I felt like I'd given it my best shot and it hadn't worked.
Mm. And what brought you back?
Well, like I said, taking those two books and putting them on Kindle, and people liked them.
Yeah, yeah.
Were
Giving
you a
it one
member
more
of a
shot.
writing group during that time, or any others? Were you networking with other writers?
No, I did not think of myself as like I said, after I didn't get traditionally published, I was just kind of like doing it for relaxation. So
You're just
I didn't.
out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Are there any failures or foibles you made early on that you can't believe? Like, why did I do that? And you can laugh about it now.
Hmm. I mean, just not. It was just the same thing. Not writing that whole time, not finishing anything. Knowing now how much money I could have made if I had just kept at it and finished some books and had them to put out. I feel like an idiot for not doing it, but at the same time, I didn't really have any incentive because I didn't know. I don't know if anybody knew that you know KDP would take off the way it did and give people that opportunity. As far as laughing about it, I don't think I've done any. I don't, maybe I'm just not good enough as laughing at my own mistakes, but no, I can't think of any.
Or maybe you just haven't done anything as embarrassing as me. Um, so Rick, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence on the show today, putting up with me and James. And I just wanted to recap a few of the things you said that stood out. And James, feel free to interject with what your takeaways are. But I think just the discipline, showing up every day. Don't waste your momentum. Have something ready for people. Preparing for success. And then, that tightrope walk of larger than life characters, not too crazy and out there, but also not too flawed. People are reading for entertainment. Um, and then, not getting down about, and this is probably just me, but not getting down about past things you've written that haven't done as successful as you'd like, because there may still be a future for those stories, and people may still enjoy them in the future. Those are my takeaways. How about you, James?
It was great to hear about the thought you've put into what made a series successful, and being able to figure out what makes it successful, which is the characters, like Dean mentioned, and then sidestep into something that's new but different. And while you've still been able to continue with series, be ready to move into something new with what you've learned. That's something I spent a lot of time thinking about as well. Yeah, I think Rick just has the strongest work ethic of any author I know right now. So I really look up to that in the work you do, and how you don't quit. But also spend a lot of time thinking about what it is that makes you successful, which I think a lot of people don't do. Like sometimes we ask folks what made a book successful, and they have no idea, and that I think is it's scary sometimes to think about that.
I didn't have any idea for years. Trust me.
Well, but I think that's work that you've done, and now you're in a very different place than, back then. So that's really interesting to me.
Working smarter and harder. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Rick, where can guests check out your work?
Well, I'm on Amazon. My author page is Rick Partlow. There's no other science fiction writer that I know that has that name, so you won't get confused. I have a website, rickpartlow.com, although I haven't updated it in quite a while. And I have a Facebook page that I'm pretty active on. It's facebook.com/duty on our planet. So look for me there. It's the best place to contact me because like I said, I don't do much with my website.
And if you subscribe to Rick on Amazon, it will be extremely motivating to get that update saying a new book from Rick Partlow like every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
There's one coming out February 6th.
Yeah.
Is that in a new series or in an existing series?
It's Sun Killer Book 2. So it's the second book, and then the series with Cheney.
Yeah, those covers look amazing.
Yeah, he's got a really great artist.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Rick. Next, in a few weeks, let's see, let me check the date here. February 12th, we are planning to have on Jonathan Yanez on the Under the Iceberg podcast here with us. So tune in to that. Thank you, everybody that came in the live chat and participated and had fun. Sorry if we didn't get to your snide comments or remarks. And
somebody mentioned that Rick is like much more serious in person than he is in comments.
Yeah,
crack me up.
So thanks, everybody. Thank you, James. Thank you, Rick. And we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. See y'all later.